All right, let's dive in. The first thing we're going to talk about is Roman numerals. And you may have some familiarity with Roman numerals. We see them on clocks sometimes, on a watch maybe. We don't really see them in a lot of Super Bowls, I guess. We have one of those coming to Vegas. Um, but basically, the way the Roman numeral system works is there are different symbols for different numbers, and we put those together to create a number. Let's take a look at that. So um, just one straight bar, that's the number one. If we put two of those together, that's a two. If we put three of those together, that's a three. And then what will happen with Roman numerals is we will never put four of the same symbol next to each other. While it might seem obvious to write four this way, that's not how the Roman system works. Instead, what the Roman system does is it uses subtraction in certain cases. And so because the symbol for 5 is a V, if we have a 1 in front of a 5, that's how we would write the number 4. And the way that you know that it's subtraction is that you have a smaller number written in front of a bigger number. And that's how we know that subtraction is what's got to happen there. That's how we know that's 1 taken away from 5, so it's a 4. And then going forward from there, the number 10 is written with an X. The number 50 is written with an L. The number 100 is written with a C. One that we don't see very often, but 500 is written with a D. And 1000 is written with an M. I don't want you to think that Romans didn't have numbers bigger than this. We're not going to really work with anything bigger than the symbol for 1,000 in the problems we work on. We're going to stay 1,000 and lower. The Romans did have the ability to go bigger than 1,000. If they wanted to write something larger than that, for example, the number 5,000, they would just use the symbol for 5 and put a bar over it. And that's how they would write 5,000. The bar over the top would indicate 1,000. So they could write extremely large numbers. For our purposes, the symbols we're going to be working with are just those. The symbol for 1, 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, and 1,000. And a couple things I want you to keep in mind. We've seen that's how we write the number 4. And if we call this an I, the symbol for 1, an I, can only go before 5 and 10. We won't put a 1 in front of something else. That is, if we wanted to write the number 499, we're not going to do ID. And the reason for that, the rule is an I can only go before a V or an X. There's a reason for that. It has to do with place values. This 1 is in the same place value position as the 5, the 1's place, as it were. And the 1 is only one place value away from the X, the 10. And so those are the only ones that you could use an I in front of. And it's because it's within one place value position. Keeping that in mind, when we're doing subtraction, an X can only go before an L or a C. And there again, it's because of place value. The X is in the tens place, the L, 50, that would be in the tens place. The C is 100, that's only one place value over. Well, you might think, well, couldn't you put an X in front of a D then? Yes, technically, but it's just not really done. X only goes before L or C. And then C is used to go before D and M. And again, that one, the place value positions hold there because C is 100, D is 500, same place value position. M is 1,000, that's just one bigger. So when it comes to subtraction, these are the only subtractions we're allowed to perform. So if we wanted to write 999, we don't do that. because I does not go before M. It only goes before V or X. Are there any questions about the structure of the Roman numeral system, what we've got here? I will sort of, if you're concerned about it, which maybe you're not there yet, but during an exam, you wouldn't have to have this memorized or written on your page of notes, although you could have it on your page of notes, but I would give you the values for the primary symbols here, the 1, 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, and 1,000. Those will be given to you. So you don't have to memorize them, and you don't have to write them on your page of notes for the exam. For the quizzes, you can have all the notes you want. Any questions about that system before we start looking at some examples? Great. Okay, so if we wanted to translate this Roman numeral into a Hindu Arabic numeral, remember, I think I might have mentioned this previously, but just in case, Hindu Arabic, those are the numbers that we use. The numbers that we use are Hindu Arabic numerals. They come from the Arabia, India part of the world, and that's the number system we use. So if you see Hindu Arabic, don't be confused by that. That's just the number system we use. We want to translate this Roman numeral into that Hindu Arabic numeral. And I think the way to do that is kind of focusing in on the place value positions. If we look at this, we can see that there's a C there. What is that C going to represent? 100. Perfect. So to Moylan, that's going to be 100. And then the next thing I see after that is I see this XL. I've got a 10 in front of a 50. I've got a smaller number in front of a bigger number, so that tells me I'm going to subtract. So XL, just by itself, the XL is going to represent what? Okay, a couple of 60s. Remember, anytime we have a smaller number in front of a larger number, when this happens, we're going to subtract. So if we had LX, that would be 50 plus 10 is 60. But in this case, because the X is first, because it's X before L, that tells us we're going to have to subtract. And so what we have here is 50 minus the 10, or 40. So the XL represents 40. And it's because we have a smaller number in front of a bigger number. That's the key that tells us we need to subtract. Great. Good. And then finally, in this one, we have VII. And the VII is going to be what? Good, Courtney. Good, Stephanie. Leslie, that's perfect. Yes, Nicole, that's right. Excellent, Jessica, that is 7. And then we just put those together. And so what this number is altogether then is 147. I think looking at the place value positions, breaking this down into pieces makes it easier to look, instead of trying to look at it all at once. Okay, it's C, XL, VII. What would that be? Well, the C is going to be 100. Okay, I got that. Then this X and L, well, the X is next to the L, so that means it's tied to it. It's a smaller number in front of a bigger number, so we're going to subtract. And then the VII is just 7. Are there any questions on that before I have you try a few of these? All right, we'll do these for practice. If you're not perfect at it right away, that's okay. A little bit of practice will go a long way on these. So translate to a Hindu Arabic numeral, MXCIV. I'm going to set up a poll for this one. Something I haven't mentioned about polls in a little while is if you don't see your answer over there, pick the one that's closest to it. That way I'll know that we've had enough time to work through the problem. And then I'll also know that, well, you'll know to make sure as we go through it together to keep an eye out for, oh, that's what happened there. Or if it doesn't become clear why your answer was different than the one that we worked toward, then make sure you ask about it. Definitely kind of question you can expect to see in the book, on a quiz, or on an exam. So we want to make sure that you're comfortable doing a problem like this. And if not, we want you to ask about it. We'll do a few of these Roman numeral type questions in class today. But my expectation is they'll get easier and easier with practice. We'll go another 20 seconds and then talk about this one. All right, let's see where we are on this. All right, unanimous. Very good. Whatever we're doing, whatever you're doing in section 2.1, it's going great. I'm thrilled. This is not always a section that students grab a hold on so well. So I'm really pleased. All right, as we look at this one then, we have this M here. That's going to be 1,000. Then we go over next to that and we see XC. We notice it's a smaller number in front of a bigger number. So that's a 10 in front of 100, which means we're going to subtract. We're going to do 100 minus 10, and that's going to give us 90. So that XC gives us 90. And then we move over again, and we see IV. There's a 1 in front of that 5. Smaller number in front of a bigger number. That means we need to subtract 5 minus 1. That means that represents 4. And so altogether here, what we have is 1,094. Great job on the poll. That's outstanding. All right, go in the other direction. Write 573 as a Roman numeral. I'll set up a poll for this one too. So 573 as a Roman numeral. Hopefully I didn't make any typos over there. Those were pretty hard to type up. I tried to be careful when I did them. Again, if you don't see your answer over there, pick the one that's closest, and that way I'll know you've had enough time. we'll go another 20 seconds on this and then talk through it. Okay, not quite unanimous, strong agreement. We'll talk about a couple of these here then. First, we'll talk through the way to write 573 as a Roman numeral, keeping in mind that we have that's a 1, that's a 5, that's a 10, that's a 50, that's a 100, that's a 500. And well, since we're this far along, that's 1,000. So there's our Roman numerals that we're going to work with. Now let's go ahead and see how we can write this. Well, 500, I want to look for the most efficient way possible to write 573. So while one of the things, and I don't think anybody answered this way, which is good, but something that might come to mind is, well, I could do 5 100s and then 7 10s and then 3 1s. And you might think, well, how's that not right? Well, a couple of reasons. One reason is we're never going to do more than 3 of a single letter in a row. Instead, we would go to subtraction. And we want to be as efficient as possible. So to get 500, the most efficient way for us to do that is just use the D for 500. Now we want 73. And I guess I could do 10 x's, but we're not allowed to write that many, or 7 x's. We're not allowed to do that many. And we want to be as efficient as possible. So to get to 70, we'll do 50, 60, 70. And then finally to get 3, we'll just do 1, 2, 3. And the key here is we want to be as efficient as possible. We want to use subtraction where it's appropriate. And in this one, we didn't need any subtraction. We were just able to write it as DLXXIII. 500, then 70, then 3. Let's try another one. Write 299 as a Roman numeral. At first glance, 299 seems like it ought to be pretty easy. I'll warn you, this one's not. Take your time on this one. I don't think it's an easy one at all. Let's go another 15 seconds and then we'll talk about it. Okay, pretty strong agreement here. We'll talk about those others. Keeping in mind that we are never going to write 4 of the same symbol in a row. So while this 9 here on the back end, we might think, how about VIII for a 9? That's no good because we're never going to write 4 of the same symbol in a row. So for that 9, we're going to use IX. We'll get to there in just a minute, though. Now we want to write 299. Okay, well, let's start by writing this 2 in 200. So 200, that's just CC. That's 200. I didn't use more than 3 of the symbol. There's nothing I can use for subtraction. I'm good with the CC. Next up, I need to write this 90 right here. 90. Well, I suppose I could think, L, X, 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 but we kind of saw that last time. That's 4 of the same symbol. That's no good. Instead, for 90, we need to do 10 taken away from 100. So we'll use XC for that 90. And then finally, for this 9 on the back end, here again, we're not going to use VIII because that would be 4 of one symbol. For 9, we're going to do 1 subtracted from 10. And then we can put this all together and have 299. One answer that did come up was the CCIC, and the reason that's no good, the reason we're not allowed to use IC for 99 is because I can only go before V or X. That's it. We're not allowed to put I in front of C. So that's why that's no good. And so we end up with CCXCIX for 299. Are there any questions about what we've done working with Roman numerals at all? This will finish off our Roman numeral discussion, so I want to make sure we're good. Polls were pretty good. There were a couple of little things, but I'm hopeful that we were able to clear those up in our discussion. But if you have any questions about anything related to the Roman numerals, let me know. All right, thanks, Nicole. That's good. That's a sure way that I know we're in good shape. Okay, moving on to Egyptian numerals. The Egyptian numeral system is an additive system, meaning we just write down the symbols, what they represent, and add them together. The Roman numeral system is kind of like that, except it has that subtraction feature built in. The Egyptian numeral system does not have that. It doesn't have the subtraction in it at all. It's just write them down, add them up, that's it. The symbols for Egyptian numerals are, we have the straight line, no, we have a straight line for a 1. Then we have this curve shape, kind of looks like the symbol for intersection. It's called a heel bone, could be, represents 10. This kind of looks like a question mark. It's often called a coil of rope. That represents 100. And then there's different ways to draw this lotus flower for 1,000. I'm going to keep it simple and draw it with a triangle with this and that on top. That is not the best drawing of the lotus flower. Our book has a pretty good one. That's one that I can draw, that you can probably draw, and that's what we'll go with for our lotus flower. As you can probably guess already, you're not really going to be able to draw these symbols on a quiz or an exam. So the questions will kind of have to go one direction, but we'll practice doing them in class just to kind of get the hang of it. So those are the only symbols we're going to have, 1, 10, 100, and 1,000. And it's an additive system, so we just add them up. Here's a look at an Egyptian numeral that I'm going to have you translate to Hindu Arabic. I'll draw the symbol, I'll draw the number, then I'll create the poll for you to tell me what the number is. You probably already know what the number is. That's fine with me. That's good. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and set up a poll anyway, just to make sure. So translating that Egyptian numeral into a Hindu Arabic numeral, what would it be? That is a great point. That's why you couldn't find the right answer in there, because I left one off. How about now? Thank you for that. Thank you, Leslie. That's good, Michaela. If y'all are looking at that number going, well, that can't be right, then you have a good understanding of how these work. So that's perfect. Um, let's go another 20 seconds on this one, and then we'll talk about it. I could say I make those mistakes on purpose just to see if y'all will catch me, but I think you'd know I was lying about that. Maybe going forward, I'll try to make some mistakes on purpose just to see if you catch me. All right, let's see what we've got on this one. Almost unanimous, pretty close. And it could be a reading of the question type of thing in this one. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. What we have here is 2,420, and then 5 ones. So it's 2,425. One thing I will say about the Egyptian numerals, because if you had a whole bunch of them, it could be kind of hard to read. What I mean by that is, let's say we wanted the number 28. It could be hard to recognize at a glance that that was 28. It would be easy to make a mistake in reading how many of those there were. For us, for our purposes, we're going to keep everything in a straight line like we did here. But I will say, if you ever come across Egyptian numerals written down, what the Egyptians would do is anytime there were more than 3, they would group them. And here's what I mean by that. Like looking at this number we just did. Now, we only had 2 of the thousands, so they'd be written that way. But we have 4 of those hundreds. So instead of putting all 4 in a line, they would group them in 3s. And here's what I mean by that. There'd be 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th one would go down there. And then at a quick glance, you can tell that it's 4. And then there's only 2 of these, so they would go like that. And then there were 5 ones, and the 5 ones would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, you could see it at a quick glance. And so they would group them in threes. So if you wanted to write the number 28, like we did down here at the bottom, it would actually be 20, and then you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so it'd be grouped like that so you could see it at a quicker glance. We don't really have the ability to type anything in rows like that. And so we'll stick with straight lines for our purposes. But I did want you to be aware of the fact that with the idea that that would be very hard to read, the Egyptians had a different plan in mind, and they would do it that way. And to be honest, just strictly visually, this is a lot more appealing than this is for 2,425. Oh, sure, Stephanie, we can do that. Yeah. Before I go back to the symbols, are there any questions about what we've got here with these Egyptian numerals? I'm gonna have you practice another one, but just to make sure we're all good. All right, yeah. So there's only 4 symbols that we're gonna work with, Stephanie, in the Egyptian system, and it's those 4: 1, 10, 100, and 1,000. And this 1,000 is a lotus flower, and there's a much better picture of it in the book. I just picked something that would be easy to draw. So that's why we went with that version. It's close. The 1, 10, and 100 are good. It's just the 1,000 can be a little bit hard to draw, so I picked something that was an easy way to draw it. Sure. Okay, so that's translating to a Hindu Arabic numeral. We had 2 thousands, 4 hundreds, 2 tens, and 5 ones, and that's how we get 2,425. I want you to try one. 1,032. I'm not going to set up a poll for this because I can't type all those symbols in the poll, but try to write 1,032. I'll give you a minute or so, maybe a little longer, and then we'll look at it together and you can see if what you did matches what I'll do. 1,032 as an Egyptian numeral. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do 1,032. If you see something that doesn't make sense or you have something completely different, you let me know. So here's our 1,000. We're not going to need any hundreds in this one. We'll need 3 tens and 2 ones. And so that's our number 1,032, written as an Egyptian numeral. Let me know if you have any questions on that. My guess is the Egyptian system is probably pretty easy to digest, but if not, it's perfectly fine to ask questions. Okay. You may be thinking, we've been working at other number bases. All of a sudden, we're doing Roman and Egyptian that have nothing to do with that. Yeah, you're right. But now we get to take other number systems and other number bases and smash those together. When we do that, we're going to talk about the Babylonian numeral system. And the Babylonian system is base 60. Now, we haven't looked at anything base 60 yet, but the philosophy is going to be the same. For base 60, we're going to have 60 to the 0. We're going to have a ones place. And then next to that, we're going to have 60 to the first. Well, 60 raised to the first, that's 60s. And then 60 to the second. Wow, that's already a pretty big number. Let's see, 60 times 60 is 3,600. Okay, so our place values are going to be ones, 60s, 3,600s. Now, we could keep going and do 60 to the third, but I think we're pretty good here with ones, 60s, and 3,600s. The Babylonian system only has two symbols in it. It has a vertical triangle like that represents 1, and then a horizontal triangle like this that represents 10. And that's it. Anybody know, and you would have to kind of be a student of history or of Babylon, or sort of really dialed into the ancient world to have an idea why those would be the symbols they use for numbers. But if anybody has a guess they want to throw out there, please do. It's okay if you don't, because this is pretty obscure. Okay, the Babylonians, oh wait. That's awesome. Well, you're not too far off, Leslie. They didn't have paper. So what they would do was they would take a reed and poke it into clay tablets. And so when you hear about these ancient clay tablets, these are Babylonian cuneiform. It's their version of calligraphy. Yeah, kind of like stamps. They could just press the reed in there, and you could press it vertically or you could press it horizontally, and that's how they would make numbers, because they didn't have paper. And so you might be thinking, okay, well, if it's just a 1 and a 10, what happens if they want to do more than that? Well, as it turns out, you would imagine, if you wanted to write the number 2, you would just do 2 of those, and there's 3. And if you wanted to do 4, curiously, they would do the same thing the Egyptians did and do 1, 2, 3, 4, and group them in threes. We're not going to do that. We're going to stick with a straight line. So that would be 4. And then with the 10s, it would be the same thing. One thing that's interesting about the 10s, though, instead of just putting them next to each other like that, they would overlap them. So 20 would look that way, and then 30 would look that way. So the 10s would be overlapped. So that's how they would write their numbers. Keeping in mind that it's a base 60 system, that's something we'll get to in a little bit. First, we're gonna stick with little numbers just to make sure we have an understanding of how those symbols work. So I'm going to write a Babylonian numeral, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what it is. I'll make a poll for it. So here's a Babylonian numeral, and then I'll have you tell me what number it is. And I guess watching me write it kind of takes some of the mystery out, doesn't it? I'm going to have to do this differently in a future semester. All right, let me make a poll for this. My guess is you've already got it, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page with these Babylonian numerals. And just like our system, they would put the 10s on the left of the 1s. There's place value associated with that. We'll go another, let's go, I don't know, 10 more seconds and then talk about this one. Okay, perfect. We are rock solid on Babylonian numerals. That's awesome. At least so far. So I want to try another one. And this time, one of the questions you might be thinking is, well, you said that there were place values, that there were ones, 60s, and 3600s. How can we tell if it's a new place value? And the way that you can tell is there will be a space involved. What I mean is, if we write a Babylonian numeral and we're using more than one place value, there will have to be a little gap in the numbers. So the fact that there's a gap right here indicates that we're moving over to the next place value. Oh, before I set up the poll for this one, that I want you to tell me what number it is. Or actually, I'll do this one with you. And then I'll have you do one in just a minute. I'll do this one with you. So here, what we have is right here. What is that number that's over there in the 60s place? Just what does this stand for by itself, just that image? Those characters right here represents what number? Nicole, let's make sure you see that that's 2 because there's 2 of them. Okay, great. So this is a 2 over here in the 60s place. And then what number do we have here in the ones place? Excellent, Jessica, Leslie, Moylan, perfect. That's a 23 in the ones place. And now essentially what we're doing is we are translating from base 60 into base 10. That's what we're doing here. We're going from base 60 to base 10. And we have 2 60s and 23 ones. So we'll have 2 60s plus 23 ones. And let's see, those 2 60s, that'll be 120, plus the 23 ones is just 23, and so that's the number 143. So this Babylonian numeral right here represents the number 143. And it's because it's 2 60s and 23 ones. Are there questions about that before I have you try one where you translate a Babylonian numeral into a Hindu Arabic numeral? Are there any questions about what we did there before I have you do one? Excellent. All right, here goes. So let's translate this to a Hindu Arabic numeral. I'll set up a poll, and you tell me what number that is in Hindu Arabic. Again, if you don't see your answer there, pick the one that's closest to it. That way I'll know you've had enough time. as you work on this, I'll let you know the Roman numerals, we're able to type those because it's, you know, a capital letter I, a capital letter V, a capital letter X, capital letter L, capital letter C, D, M. The Egyptian numerals, we're not really able to type those at all. The Babylonians, though, we are going to be able to type these. And I'll talk about that after we finish this one off. We'll go another 20 seconds and then talk through this one. I think the Roman numerals, the Egyptian numerals tend to go extremely well. The Babylonian are a little tougher. Part of that is the base 60 nature of the numbers. Part of that is the symbols are a little bit different. And so the Babylonians are a little tougher. All right, let's see what we've got here. Okay, very strong agreement. That's excellent. And I would think the other thing is just an issue of remember that we do have place values here, and our place values are ones and 60s. So in our base 10 system, it would be ones and tens, but in the Babylonian system, it's ones and 60s. And so when we go to translate this from base 60 to base 10, which that's definitely what we're doing here. We're taking this base 60 number and translating it to base 10, what we were working on Tuesday. So let's see, that means that I have 3 60s plus, let's see, that's 10, 11, 12 ones. So that's 180 plus 12. So that is 192. This number right here represents 192. A couple of things I want to mention about Babylonian numerals before we do what you're probably expecting, which is going the other direction, going from base 10 to base 60. We are going to finish off with that. But before we do that, I wanted to mention that we can actually type Babylonian numerals. There's only 2 symbols there. So what we're going to use for the 1 is the same thing we would use for a Roman numeral 1. It's just the capital letter I. Also, you can use on your keyboard all the way to the, let's see, if you go to where the P is, to the right of that, you've got the letter P, and then you have braces and brackets. And then to the right of that, you have a straight up and down bar and a backslash. And this straight up and down bar could also be used for the 1 in a Babylonian numeral. For the 20, well, that, or the 10, excuse me, for the 10, we can just use the less than symbol. The less than symbol is what we're going to use for the 10, and that's down where the period is on your keyboard. To the left of that, you'll see a comma, and up on top of the comma is the less than symbol. So if we wanted to type this number on our keyboard, the way that we would type this Babylonian numeral is it would be I, space, because we want to indicate different place value, less than I. So that's how we'll type this in. We can't really make that triangular shape, especially vertically, but we can still type these, and that's how we're going to do it. Okay, let's go the other direction. Write 86 as a Babylonian numeral. I won't set up a poll for this because we're not quite ready for that, I don't think. I do want to remind you that what we're going to have here is our place values is ones, 60s, and 3,600s. The process we're going to use here is the same as the process we used when we were going from base 10 to base 4, or from base 10 to base 8. So this time we're just going from base 10 to base 60. And then after we figure out what's going to need to go in these place value positions, we have to write them using the Babylonian characters. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to work on this one, and then we'll talk about it together. I won't set up a poll just yet. I want to see how this one goes first. But try this one. Write 86 as a Babylonian numeral. So we'll go one more minute on this, and then we'll talk about it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start talking through this. If you see something that you're not sure of or doesn't make sense, you let me know. The process should look just like what we were doing on Tuesday when we were translating something from base 10 to another base. So my place values in this base 60 system are ones, 60s, and 3,600s, but my number is 86. So I'm not going to need any 3,600s at all. So the first thing I have to decide is how many 60s will it take? And you might look at the number 86 and say, well, it'll just take one 60. Great. Others of you might not be that comfortable there yet and say, well, 86 divided by 60 will give me 1 point something. The something doesn't matter, but what I know now is I'm going to need one 60. And then how much of this did that account for? Well, I was trying to write the number 86. I just took care of 60 of it. So now 86 minus 60 will leave me with 26. Well, it's weird to have 26 in the ones column, but in a base 60 system, that's okay. We'll have 26 in the one column. And so we're going to have 160 and 26 ones. And when we write that as Babylonian numeral, we'll have 160 and then 10, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 160 and 26 ones. And so that's the number 86 written as a Babylonian numeral. One thing I think I meant to say on the last one and I didn't get there. Um, you might look at base 60 and think, boy, that's weird. Base 60? Why in the world would you have base 60? Well, if you think about our clocks, we have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. So if I were to say to you that our class is 80 minutes long, you would immediately go, well, that's an hour and 20 minutes. Well, 80 minutes long would be 160 and 21s. That's an hour and 20 minutes. So we use base 60 a lot more than we realize. Um, it's kind of built into our time. So base 60 might feel like, what an odd choice. Yeah, maybe it is, but it's something that we see pretty regularly, actually. Okay, let's try one more. I'm going to do a poll for this one. I want you to write 912 as a Babylonian numeral. I'll set up a poll for this one. It was a little bit hard for, oh, okay, you can see them pretty good. Okay. It was a little bit hard for me to put the spaces in there the way that the typing the poll works, but I think you can tell that there are two spaces in the first choice, two spaces in the second choice, one space in the third, and one space in the fourth. Because when the less than symbol is right up against the vertical bar, that's easy to tell when it's close to it. So it makes it a little bit easier to see when there's a space. For those vertical bars, I didn't use the capital letter I. I used the vertical bar that is to the right of the braces. And the reason for that is I think it's more distinct than the capital letter I. So that will be our convention for us then, is to go with the vertical bar that's to the right of the braces instead of using the capital I. I can tell you that as far as Roman, Egyptian, and Babylonian numerals go, I think this is the toughest type of question you could possibly see. Going back and forth between Roman and Hindu Arabic, the only thing to be careful of is make sure you use the subtraction properly. Egyptian, generally pretty simple. And then Babylonian, just be careful of the base 60. Given the fact that Tuesday went great as far as translating to and from other bases, I'm pretty confident that this is going to go really well also. Oh, I do want to give you one heads up about this on the quiz. Sometimes, if you have to type a Babylonian numeral like this, there are times where Canvas just doesn't want to recognize your, less than symbol, vertical bar symbol as a proper character. Please make sure after you take quiz 6 that you review your answers. And if Canvas didn't score your answer correctly, especially on one like this, but honestly on any question, if you don't think Canvas scored it correctly, you should let me know and I'll take a look. But especially on these, Canvas isn't used to answers that look like what we're coming up with here, right? Less than symbol, vertical bar. So sometimes it won't read those as correct answers. If that happens and you look at yours and it's correct, then just send me an email and I'll go take a look at it for you. We'll go another 15 seconds on this and then talk through it together. I will say that I love this question because it's not only converting from base 10 to base 60, but it also involves using a number system different than ours. So there's a skill there and an understanding of a number system there. I think, there's a whole lot of concepts wrapped up in one question, and that's always something that is great. All right, let's see how we did. Okay, unanimous. Not everybody responded to this one, but still unanimous. And if you see something in here that doesn't make sense, you let me know. So let's take a look here. Remembering that we're going to Babylonian means we're base 60. So we're going to have a ones column. We're going to have a 60s column. Next would be 3,600s, but we don't need any of those because our number is 912. So the first question we ask ourselves is how many 60s? Now this one I can't do in my head. I'm actually going to have to do the division. 912 divided by 60 will be, I get 15.2. The 0.2, we don't care about what's over there. We do care about the 15 though. That's going to be 15 in the 60s column. Weird for us to have a 2-digit number in a single place value, but it's base 60. We could have a number all the way up to 59 in there. So we can certainly have 15. What this has done is this is taken care of, well, that's 15 times 60. So that's taken care of 900 of my number. I'm trying to get to 912. That means I need 12 over here in the ones column. And so my answer then is going to be 15, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, little space, and then 12 in the ones column. So what I end up with here is 12 in the ones column, 15 in the 60s column. One thing I will say, it's an excellent question that sometimes comes up, is if we had a Babylonian numeral. So this has nothing to do with the question we were just working on. Oh, anybody have questions about what we just did there? Converting from base 10 to base 60 and then writing our number as a Babylonian numeral. If you have any questions on that, let me know. I get a sense that we're doing fantastic. Okay. One of the questions that comes up with Babylonian numerals sometimes is, what if somebody saw that? How would they know what it is? Because that could be in the ones place and mean 1, or it could be in the 60s place and mean 60, or it could be in the 3,600s place and mean 3,600. It's an excellent question, and the only way that a Babylonian would know was by context. If you were talking about how many children you had, it's probably 1. If you were talking about how many people lived in your village, it might be 60, it might be 3,600, but you could tell that by sort of looking at the village and see, is it pretty small? Is it larger? So the way you would be able to tell a number like this is just by context. In our number system, if we just write 1, we know it means 1 because if we wanted to say 100, we put zeros after it. But the Babylonians didn't have the 0 yet. It was actually the Mayans that invented, discovered, use whichever term you see fit there, the zero, and started using zeros in their numbers. Um, but otherwise, with a symbol like this that could be in any number of place values, you just have to know by context. Okay.